Hello everybody, this is Top MTG here today with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, I'm going to be going over a custom set of cards based around the movie Spider-Man Homecoming. So essentially what I'm doing here is I'm taking characters, items, and events from the movie and I'm turning them into Magic cards. This is just one small part in a giant series I'm doing called Magic the Marveling. Now, don't worry if you haven't seen the previous videos, you don't really need to. However, if you want to check them out, there will be a playlist and there'll be a link in the description where you can find that. The only things you really need to know from the past sets is that heroes, as in like the creature type, because there's now a creature type of hero and there's a creature type of villain. Heroes are generally blue, white, red, and occasionally green, and villains are typically blue, black, and red. On top of that, to save space on the type line, I changed the creature type of hero, which, I created, and the creature type of Avenger, and I simplified it. So it's no longer legendary creature hero, it's now just legendary hero. And that's because of characters like Thor, who would be a legendary creature Avenger hero god Asgardian noble. That's way too many creature types. So keep when you see legendary hero, it is just a creature with the hero type. Alrighty. That's all you should need to know. Why don't we jump right into this? Starting off, we have Spider-Man. So he's a 4-cost blue and red legendary hero, enhanced human, 3/4 with reach. And he says whenever another hero or scientist you control attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on Spider-Man. So scientist is another new type I created, along with enhanced actually. This guy just has cares about all sorts of new types. But what this is going to want to do is it's going to make you want to put Spider-Man with a bunch of other heroes and or scientists. He wants to be with people like Tony Stark. He wants to fight the big threats and he wants to fight alongside them. And he also has the ability pay 3, tap target non-land permanent with converted mana cost less than or equal to Spider-Man's power. It doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So a pretty simple tap down, like he's webbing something, but he needs to get stronger and more experienced to be able to take down the bigger threat. So overall, this kind of takes the theme of having to grow and having to learn and then being able to take on bigger threats in the future, and I think this encapsulates it all really well in one card. Now, speaking of, kind of having this theme, we have Tony Stark Mentor. It's a 4-cost blue legendary hero human scientist 1/2 with hexproof, and it says Tony Stark Mentor can't be blocked, and so he's an unblockable 1/2 for 4, and he says activated abilities of creatures and artifacts you control cost 2 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the amount of mana and ability cost to activate to less than 1 mana, so it can't make abilities free, so he has hexproof and he can't be blocked. That's pretty good, but for 4, a 1/2 isn't amazing. But what works really well with this is that he synergizes perfectly with Spider-Man. He can't be blocked, so you can always attack, so you can always put a counter on him, and he makes it easier for Spider-Man to tap him down. He's kind of like this, crutch that Spider-Man is using, which obviously in Magic, you just want synergy, but he's kind of this crutch he's using. Now, what's interesting here is that this is one of the few cards that has him as Tony Stark, not Iron Man, because in this movie, yes, he is Iron Man, but he is most of the time acting as Tony Stark, so I think that is a little more appropriate for the set. Next, we have Ned Leeds. It's a 3-cost white legendary creature human 2/2, and whenever a hero you control attacks, you may pay 1 and either 2 or a white, so it'll either be 3 generic mana or 1 and a white. If you do that, hero gains indestructible until end of turn. Very similar. It synergizes with Spider-Man, but here you're now adding a third color. So for instance, Ned Leeds couldn't go in a commander deck with Spider-Man into the helm, and maybe that's something that needs to be changed. Maybe I need to throw an ability on him that gives him white, but I think that creates an interesting dynamic where Spider-Man really isn't ready to lead. So this just makes it really easy for heroes to attack, and he's kind of assisting Spider-Man, so that also helps. So it gives him a lot of synergy on the card, and it makes sense from an in-movie perspective. Pretty good. Next, we have Liz. So we're kind of just going down all of the school kids and all of them. So we have she's a 3-cost white legendary creature human 0/5 with defender. She really doesn't go out and fight and she's not really in the action. She kind of stays back, and it says whenever a hero enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 2 if you do draw a card. So this is white card draw for white, and it's very similar to Mentor of the Meek, but instead of caring about creatures with power 2 or less, it's just heroes, which makes it even more, narrow. She's kind of a fangirl for Spider-Man, and I wanted to capture the fact that she looked up to all these heroes, and so I think that this is an interesting way to do it, and it would be an interesting inclusion within a hero deck. But a lot of the cards that care about heroes are not necessarily heroes, so it's kind of interesting. Next, we have Michelle. She's 1 white for a 0/1 indestructible human. Whenever a creature you control is targeted by a spell, she gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Just kind of, always watching, seeing what's happening. If a event, which are often instants and sorceries, happens to a character, she sees that, she, learns something from that, she gets a little stronger. She's just always kind of there. And I wanted to kind of show that in a card. Also, designing cards for mono white is surprisingly difficult. So yeah, I thought this was kind of interesting. Next, we have Flash Thompson. He is a 3-cost, a lot of 3-cost, white legendary creature human, 2/1. And he has cumulative upkeep, tap and untap creature you control. So what this means is that when you first play him, nothing's going to happen. At your next upkeep, you're going to put a age counter on it, and then you have to pay its cost for each age counter. So you'll have to tap an untap creature you control. And then the turn after that, there'll be 2 age counters, which means you'll have to tap 2 creatures. So he's kind of slowly dragging everyone down, but he has the effect of, at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, if you control more tapped creatures than untapped creatures, draw a card. So it's kind of this temporary card draw. You might play him when you have 5 creatures, and then, at you're going to draw a card most likely because your creatures probably aren't going to be tapped. But then, the next turn you're going to have to tap a creature, and now eventually he won't even draw you cards, so at that point it might be worth it to just sacrifice him and not tap the creatures. It's just interesting card design, I feel like, and it's a way to design white card draw. If you can tell, I'm trying to kind of include that in here. Next, we have May Parker. This is, again, a 3-cost, a white legendary creature, human, 1/2, and when she enters the battlefield or attacks, choose 1, scry 2, you gain 2 life, or look at target face-down card. She's trying to kind of gain information and help Peter. I just tried to encapsulate that in a generic card. Again, kind of hard to design for mono white, but that's not important. I think this card just works well in the fact that Spider-Man is going to want you to attack, and maybe this doesn't go in that deck, but it's just an interesting card that's very versatile, similar to some cards we've seen recently in Standard, like Charming Prince. Next, we have a Happy Watchful Eye, 5-cost white legendary creature human, 3/3, and whenever Happy when he enters the battlefield, another target permanent you control gains hexproof for as long as you control him. So he's kind of there trying to protect Spider-Man, and so he can give him hexproof as long as he's on the battlefield. So it's kind of just like an extra layer you have to take down. There is a version of this in white that gives something indestructible. I know hexproof isn't a super white ability. Maybe protection from all colors, I don't know. I just feel like this works well, and it kind of gets the theme across that maybe, I just really like the way this works within a gameplay perspective, and I think it works out well. Next, we have Aaron Davis. It's a 2-cost white legendary creature, human, 2/2, and when he enters the battlefield, scry 1, so just a little bit of added bonus there, but you can pay 2 and reveal the top card of your library. If it's an equipment card, you may put it in your hand. So someone who's going to care about equipment, he has seen a arms deal, and so I think that this was trying to, encapsulate that, but he's not necessarily a bad guy, so I don't know. It's just an interesting mono white card that would fit well into any equipment deck. Next, we have the main villain, that being Adrian Toomes. So he's a flip card, as a lot of villains and actually heroes are. So we have Adrian Toomes. He's a 5-cost blue and black legendary creature human, and that was actually very difficult for me to decide whether he should be a legendary villain human, but I decided that, he's not really this big villain. He's just trying to provide for his family. I ended up giving him the villain tag on the other side, partially for gameplay reasons, and also because he is a bad guy. I just thought it'd be more interesting in a villain deck if he isn't always one, and you have to kind of meet this condition. But he says sacrifice a non-token artifact, and he gets plus 0 plus 2, so you can sacrifice things, you can kind of scavenge things to help him survive. You can sacrifice 2 non-token artifacts to give him Shroud, so now he can really survive. And you can tap and sacrifice 6 non-token artifacts, and at the beginning of the next end step, transform him. Now, the reason it is worded like this, first off, non-token. Why is that there? Well, I don't want people to generate a bunch of treasures and be able to just activate these abilities a ton. I want the people to actually get out lots of artifacts. And 6 is very hard to get. I don't want this, in the set, I have a couple mechanics such as Sell, which can create credit or unit tokens. Those changed names recently, and scrap tokens, and just really easy ways to make token artifacts. There's some token artifacts like scrap tokens, which are just tokens that are just artifacts, just to be artifacts. And so, that's very important here. But we then see him transform into Vulture, which, obviously tapping, which means he can't do it the turn he comes out, and you have to sacrifice 6 non-token artifacts, and they can kill him. If an opponent can kill him after you sacrifice the 6 artifacts, he won't transform because you have to wait till your end step. So it is very hard to transform him. So what do you get for that? You get a 7/7 with flying, and whenever he attacks, you may sell target non-land, non-token permanent the defending player controls, which means you're kind of gonna here's what sell does, right? You exile the permanent. Normally you sell your own stuff. It's very rare that you sell an opponent's thing. There's one card, I believe, that says target opponent sells something they control. They get to choose what they sell. But essentially, you're going to exile whatever it is, and then each player is going to choose a number besides you, each opponent. And then you can pick one of those players, and you create a number of credit tokens, which are kind of like a colorless version of treasures, but you can also sacrifice multiple of them to get colored mana. Either way, you can exile it, choose a number from one of your opponents that they picked, they gain control of it, like it enters the battlefield under their control, and you create a number of credit tokens equal to the number they chose. So essentially each person's kind of bidding for whatever you're selling, and if you don't like any of the options, you can choose no one and just create 1 credit token and it stays exiled. So at its worst, this says whenever he attacks, exile target creature, create a credit token. That on its own could be enough. But he also says, when Vulture dies, return up to 6 artifacts with total converted mana cost 10 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So, you'll notice 6, you had to sacrifice 6 of them to transform him, so maybe you had a bunch of 0 cost artifacts. You throw them on the battlefield, or not even 0, maybe you had a bunch of 1-drop artifacts. You sacrifice them all for Adrian Tombs, you get him on his other side, and then someone's like, haha, kill him now. Well, you get to return all those artifacts, so you didn't lose them. Maybe you lost them temporarily. And then you can sacrifice 5 units, and target player chooses one of the following counters to put on Vulture that is not already there. Menace, Death Touch, Hexproof, Lifelink, or Vigilance. So you're going to sacrifice 5 credits, which you're probably going to get a decent amount of because you're selling things. And you can give him, basically your opponent chooses which would probably be the worst for you at the time. But they cannot choose multiple. Like if he already has a Lifelink counter, he can't get another one. Overall, it's a very powerful card, but it does take a lot to get you there, and it's very easy to, actually play this. You spend 5 mana, then you accidentally tap and sacrifice 6 artifacts, and you get nothing out of it because someone kills him. So it's a very risky card. Also, he's a thief. Yeah, just interacts with other cards. Next, we have Herman Skoltz. It's a 3-cost red legendary creature human 1/2, and whenever it enters the battlefield, create a weapon token attached to it, which is just a token artifact equipment that gives it +1/+1, and then it gets +1/+0 for each equipment attached to it. So it is a 3/3 for 3, but if you can equip with more things, it gets bigger. So not bad. Next, we have Tinkerer. It's a 3-cost blue and red legendary creature, human scientist, 2/2, and you can pay X in a blue and tap and sacrifice an artifact, and look at the top X cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact card with converted mana cost X or less and put it onto the battlefield. So, you could just end up tapping and, sacrificing an artifact and not getting anything, but if you're running this in a purely artifact deck, that seems highly unlikely, and just a way for you to cycle through your artifacts. Also, the CMC of the artifact you sacrifice has nothing to do with it, so you could sacrifice a token artifact like a treasure or a unit. Next, we have Moving Day and Moving Day Heist. These are the sagas for this, set. Each set has saga, or each set of cards has sagas for the most part, because, sagas are meant to tell stories. I'm talking about a movie. It just makes a lot of sense. So, Moving Day, red and a white, and it says exile each non-land permanent you control, and then on step 2, create a token of each permanent exiled with moving day, and then step 3, return all permanent exiled with moving day to the battlefield under target opponent's control. So this is a really interesting card and would not go in every deck, but essentially you're going to make yourself vulnerable for a turn, then you get a copy of all your stuff that's tokens. So obviously you get to keep your lands, and then you can return all permanents exiled with it to the battlefield under target opponent's control. So you're going to give your opponent all your stuff. So this is a very like commandery card where you're gonna want to like, hey, who wants a copy of all my stuff, or actually all your stuff. And what's interesting about this is since you get the tokens, it's not like you get your stuff back and your opponents get the tokens. If someone like Cyclonic Rifts, where they're gonna bounce everything back to hand, you lose everything. But what's also interesting is if you have a card that returns all permanents that are yours to your control, this can kind of just duplicate all your tokens for 2 mana in red and white. So it has some interesting implications with other cards, but what's interesting is we have Moving Day Heist, which you can pay 5 mana, and it says until your next turn, if a player would create a token, you gain control of it. So what the idea here is, if someone plays Moving Day, and you have Moving Day Heist, in response, you can play this. So you'll notice step 1, they're going to exile each and all land permanent. Now, on your next turn, if you play Moving Day Heist, you'll have that first effect, which then means on their next turn, they're going to have create a token of each permanent exile of the Moving Day, which means that you're going to gain control of all those permanents. On top of that, it's also a useful ability. It also interacts with a lot of other things in the set, like selling things, because you would gain control of that token. It's a very powerful ability, and it's interesting to see how they align. So imagine whenever 2 goes off on Moving Day, 1 will have gone off on Moving Day Heist. So then number 3, return all permanents exiled with Moving Day to the battlefield under target opponent's control, and then it says you get an emblem with red, remove this emblem from the game, or like remove this emblem, so you only get to use it once. Change the target's of target ability of an enchantment. So it's very, very narrow. The second one is very narrow. It essentially lets you guaranteed be the one who gets chosen if you choose to save a red, and then pay 3, create 2 unit tokens. So yeah, even if that second ability does nothing, at least you are getting 2 unit tokens and that first ability. So it's a very interesting card, very kind of narrow, but also very wide. It's interesting. Then we have, I believe, our last card for today. It's Start Cargo Plane. It's a 5-cost artifact vehicle, 7/7 with flying, and whenever an opponent attacks you, that player may pay 3. If they do, Start Cargo Plane becomes a creature, and they gain control of Start Cargo Plane until end of turn. It is tapped and attacking a player other than you if able. So essentially, you're going to say, hey, if you attack me, you can also attack my opponent, which is kind of a weird deck, but it's a very commandery card. It's also a 7/7 for 5. So, you do get that advantage here. It's a very interesting card, and there are weird ways you could use it, and I thought it'd be interesting to design. Either way, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Those were all the characters and, kind of important cards. Obviously, there are a lot more cards, and I'm sure a ton of them are scrolling in front of you right now. But again, if you want to see all of the cards, link in the description down below. If you guys want to see more like this with other movies, I have a playlist. You guys should check that out. If you enjoyed, please hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.